So, Tammy, tell me, what were you doing before becoming a psychologist? Would love to hear the story before that and how you got into it.
Yeah, well, I was actually interested in veterinary medicine. And then my chemistry grades were not high enough in university. I was in pre-vet med. And then I was really good with kids. So I was like, well, I'll be a teacher. So I got a bachelor's of education, but I also did a double degree in psychology because I was really interested in psychology. And a lot of my family members are psychologists. So I thought, well, we'll see. One of them's going to work out. I can't be a vet, so I'm either going to be a psychologist or I'm going to be a teacher. So I went down the teacher route initially as a kindergarten teacher, and I taught third grade for a while. And then I got a scholarship to go down to the United States for my master's in psychology. So I thought, well, I'm not going to say no to free education. So I went down and studied psychology for 3 years as post-grad, and I was going to be a marriage counselor. I studied marriage therapy, and I actually was a sex therapist and a marriage therapist before I became a child psychologist. So it was this really weird trajectory in my career where I was doing all of this really interesting kinds of therapy with couples. And then when I graduated, I was hired by a nonprofit to work with kids, but I actually had no training in working with kids, but I was a teacher first. So I was like, oh, I'm going to give this a shot. I know kids. I've worked with kids my whole life. I was a swimming coach. I taught first aid. I worked in summer camps with kids. So I did my first session with a little guy with ADHD, 8 years old. And I was like, oh, I'm supposed to be doing this. Okay. So this is that was the first time I think in my whole life where it really clicked, where you feel like I'm in the right place at the right time and everything was leading me towards this. It just took me like 8 years to figure it out. So from then I moved back to Canada and I started private practice and working with kids and teens almost exclusively in therapy. And then I just developed this love for working with parents. And most psychologists who work with kids don't like working with parents because the kids are the fun part. The parents are the hard part. But I loved working with parents because I saw the biggest changes in kids when I worked with the parents. So to me, I was like, this is the way through. If you can get through to the parents, the kids naturally start to make changes. Like if this just makes sense, you need to make friends with the parents, get them on board, teach them about what's going on with their child, and teach them what to do differently at home. And then the therapy you don't even need the therapy at that point. So I started teaching libraries, local colleges, universities. And from then I realized it was something. So I brought on one of my best friends who was also a psychologist in my former private practice. I had started a group practice and we had about 3 locations in Canada and brought her on as a separate business venture to start teaching. So we started flying all over the world, actually went to Africa, the United States, different parts of Canada, and started presenting on mostly childhood anxiety and trauma. Those were the biggest ones, but we did talk about like discipline, which we wrote a book and that included kind of a big section on that, just to teach parents how to discipline and parent kids with the brain in mind. So we're not undermining kind of their development. And yeah, it turned into a book and turned into a podcast and it turned on to an online learning platform and memberships and now conferences and summits. And yeah, it just kind of social media. We do a lot on social. So I don't know. So it's an interesting journey actually into this from wanting to be a vet, but now I'm actually an animal assisted therapist. So the love of animals, I run a ranch, a therapeutic ranch with 6 therapists out here. And we own 100 acres and we do animal assisted therapy out here. So, I mean, we have horses and goats and sheep, cats, dogs, geese, chickens, and they're all part of the therapy for kids. So I didn't give up on that part, but I did sell the big practice and just specialized in animal assisted therapy out here. So yeah, it's kind of it's interesting kind of where that went.
But I'm going to get back to the transition from the private practice to the online education stuff. But first, I just wanted to ask, animal assisted therapy. Can you talk a little bit more about that? What does that look like? That's for kids, is it? Yeah.
I use it with seniors. Usually it's kids just because of their impulse control, like 6 or 7 years old and up, right? Because we've got big animals, big horses that weigh 1,200 pounds, little children, we have to be careful. And not to mention little ones can really scare animals. So we have to be careful. But once kids hit about, 7, we bring them out here. And I mean, I think kids, we talk about mental health with kids. One of the biggest issues we're seeing is kids have nature deprivation. People aren't spending enough time outdoors. They need to be around animals. They need to be near trees and water and sunlight. And when kids spend all their time indoors, this takes a huge toll on their mental health. So part of what we do is nature-based. The kids are outside doing the therapy, not in an office. This is particularly important for boys. Boys don't do well sitting on a couch talking about their feelings. That's not how their brain works. So actually the nature and animal-assisted therapy really speaks to boys in particular, that I think it's really important when we look at brain differences there. But I think it's a way for kids to connect when they're scared to connect with adults. Adults have hurt them a lot. They don't trust a lot of adults. So the animals make them feel unconditional love. They learn how to handle really large animals. And so that teaches competency and self-efficacy, autonomy. It's biofeedback. So when you work with prey animals like goats and sheep and horses, if you're angry or really anxious and you're too much in your head, actually animals don't like that. They'll move away from you because you're acting like a predator. And humans are predators. But for some reason, when we ruminate and we're too much in our heads, animals actually move away from that. It's very disconcerting for them because we're not present in our bodies. So when children learn to regulate their feelings and their thoughts, the animals are more likely to connect with them. So it serves as this animate tool for our kids to learn to work with their thoughts and their feelings and regulate their bodies. And then they're rewarded with this beautiful attachment relationship with this, sometimes very large animal. So I think I could go on and on about why we do this, but those are some of like the main premises of why it's just very rewarding for anyone to work with animals. Like they love it, but there's some pretty hard science wired into why we do it.
Yeah, that's lovely. And how are you sort of creating the connection of the animals on the farm are you partnering with local clinics and organizations to get people to come out, or how does that?
I've been doing this for quite a while. So, 10 years in this community. So I think it took time to develop that and awareness with different, we have family and community supports and child and family services and different towns in the region and schools. And then it just word of mouth kind of spreads at that point. And a lot of the girls who practice out here have their own profiles online and they advertise that they do this work. Especially in a rural community where mental health, there's a stigma. When you come out to a ranch and there's cabins instead of offices, it has a very different feel than people sitting in this clinic where it feels very medicinal. And it's very private. You're not going to see anybody out here. Typically, there's only 2 therapists and they're placed at a time and they're placed in different areas of the property. So you don't run into people you might know either. So it's just, I feel like it just helps when there's maybe a rural stigma still with mental health in this part of Canada. In some areas, not all areas, but definitely this area.
No, that's fantastic. Sounds really, really lovely. So just getting back to the transition from you when you mentioned you had the private and group clinic there. What was that point where you decided, hey, I want to start teaching? And what did that start to look like? Were you starting to speak, at local events? Did you start to create content online? Yeah, what was that? Because there's a lot of probably listeners out there that maybe have a service-based business already and they're thinking about, okay, how do I start to teach online? What's the progression that you took?
Well, my progression was teaching in person. So for me, I have an education background. I'm used to talking in front of big groups of people. So this all started with me teaching in libraries and universities. And I don't mean I have been an instructor in a university, but that's not what I mean. I rented out space at universities and advertised through Facebook or Instagram through schools that I was doing this. I think the online part came as a result of an advice I got from a media consultant. This is before people were doing courses, a lot of courses. And I was just told, you need to get on the bandwagon with this. This was 8 years ago. And this is before people were doing free webinars and summits, we started doing this and then COVID hit. And then we had to shift our business model online. But before that, it was in person. And to this day, I don't mind doing this, but I would much rather be teaching to an organization, 100 people in the seats, getting to talk with them, learning about their lives versus, being online teaching. It's not my favorite, actually. Tanya, my business partner, loves it. Yeah. I prefer to connect with people in person. It's more extroverted. So sitting in my house doing this is not nearly as fun as, being with a group of people. But I think what it came down to is it really lit me up. I was so passionate about it. I enjoyed the interaction with people and knowing that I could help hundreds of families instead of just one at a time. To me, that was huge. And then they're going and teaching this stuff and then their kids are going to heal and those kids are going to be better parents. So the ripple effect was so much bigger globally for me. It just was really exciting to make that big of an impact. versus, and not to, we need people to work one-on-one with families. I am not saying, I do not want to discount that. But for me, I had a bigger vision for how we could make an impact. And that was, I didn't want to limit that to the town I was living in at the time, or the city, I should say.
Yeah.
And then I don't know, I started moving away from therapy. It just wasn't lighting me up in the same way. And I felt like resistance to it. And I realized I was just happier working as a consultant and teaching and working with parents and some coaching too. It's not, I still like teaching better than coaching, but it's just like, I guess there's just a fire that lights inside of you. And that's where I was at. I like making things, I like connecting, and I like the global impact piece. So I think that for me was, that did it.
No, that's great. And what does that look like now for the business? Are you still doing sort of lots of events in person at the teaching side? Yeah. What does that look like? Because I understand that's a massive impact if you're getting 100 parents in a room and then they go home and they all get to implement those learnings to their children. There is a massive ripple effect there. So what does it look like now for the business? I know you've got the summit coming up as well, but are you also still doing workshops in person as well?
Absolutely. Not in the same. COVID really, and that's, I think, if we're talking about business, COVID changed people's mentality about education. It really shifted. And what we noticed was after COVID was done, well, not that it was done, we're still feeling the effects, but when it was done, it was more difficult to get people in a seat. Like they wanted the option of live streaming. They wanted it recorded. And it was actually quite tedious to run an event where we paid for it in person. So what we had to do is switch to a B2B business model where we do more, people hire us to come speak for an organization or for an event, if that makes sense, versus us. We used to plan all of our own speaking events in different cities in the world. And that definitely shifted. Plus money, like the economy, like people had, they spent money during COVID because they're bored at home. And now I'm pretty sure this is global. Cost of living have skyrocketed so high that people, it's difficult for them to take time off work and to pay for something where they have to invest in sitting there in a seat versus when they can learn on a weekend, it's recorded. If they can't make it, if their kids are sick, like they still have the recording of what's going on. And then, of course, we have the option of like passive courses that people take as well. So it's self-paced. So we tried to provide as many options as we can. But COVID shifted everything for our business. Everything.
Yeah.
I preferred the old business model. I liked teaching in person. I liked traveling when we got to set up events. But, that's the way of business. You just have to pivot and just say, like, what does the consumer want? What is most helpful for parents? Where are they at resource-wise?
Yep.
And so we just have learned to just shift. Since COVID, it's about every 8 months, we have to make a big pivot in terms of what the market trends are and what is most helpful for parents and trying to figure that out.
That's a really interesting point because, getting to work with a lot of education businesses like yours, we hear the same thing and saw the impact of COVID as well, obviously during that period of the boom and online course sales, online, workshops, events. There really was that 1-2 year period there.
It was a really good period.
Yeah.
The market is flooded now.
Exactly. And it's a different landscape. What have you seen in your business? How is that sort of particularly in the last 12 months? Because we've seen a different trend occurring of a lot of people actually starting to look for more in-person live events as well. So have you also noticed that trend? And if you have, like, how are you pivoting and starting to, or what trends are you seeing that you're trying to tailor for right now?
Absolutely. So we've had talks with multiple creators, like online, because for our niche, right? We keep in touch with people who are on Instagram, on Facebook, who sell courses and memberships. And I joke, we sold memberships before memberships were cool. So we really benefited in the beginning from offering memberships, which was like 7 years ago. And then everybody started doing it. We're like, darn it, okay. So now we're competing with all of these digital creators that came up during COVID, especially TikTok, Instagram were huge. So, you've just got to think about like what the market looks like. So for us, the shift was podcast. And so the shift has been, we're moving more towards YouTube. We're moving more towards B2B marketing. So again, that's, yes, in person, but it's through partnering with organizations so they carry the weight of the funding. So us as government contracts, working with, people who have seen us speak, or we can show them videos because we've done so much speaking in person. that they can take a look, and we have videos of it. And then they say, yes, we want to hire you, if that makes sense. So understanding that I think the trends in memberships and courses is tanking right now. It's not that you can't make money doing it. It just means it's harder to be seen and to stand out because there's so many courses and so many memberships. So a lot of creators I'm seeing are moving more towards passive income through monetizing. So if they're a creator, which I am on Instagram, we do a lot of videos. And so we monetize our videos through Meta and through YouTube. And when you can create really favorable content and you have something to say, if you have, a WordSense account or AdSense account with Google, you can make money that way where you don't have to sell anything. As long as people like what you're teaching, you can just teach and put these I think optimal view time is 8 minutes, like 8 minutes plus. So you can put ads in your videos and people can start consuming your content on YouTube. And that's where I've seen a lot of creators start to go. Instead of, they offer the membership, they offer the course, but now they're moving more towards monetizing their content in passive ways through, if it's their blog, there's ads on their blogs. Like, you just have to think of, I hate that people will stick to one avenue. I only sell courses. I was like, well, now everyone's selling courses. So you need other ways to bring in passive income. And so I think diversifying what you offer and looking at different platforms and how you can bring in income that way is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be curious to learn a little bit more about what you're doing there. You said you're sort of partnering with organizations. Is that then to host events and stuff like that? Like get organizations to fund the events?
Yeah, it's professional development for their teams. Yeah. So whether it's a school, community groups, whatever, usually for us, it's like government groups. Like in Canada, for instance, it would be Indigenous groups, especially. So when they're, especially since the orange, we have this big movement with residential schools in Canada where we looked at, all the children who have been found, who passed in residential schools and all the abuse, that intergenerational trauma that's been passed down. We now do a lot of trainings in these communities on how to recover from that kind of trauma. So that's an example where that's a niche of mine, particularly. I'm a trauma therapist. So I come into communities and then we talk about, like, this is what you can do to heal these patterns of what has happened over the last, 100 years when colonization happened. How do we move forward? So I think finding your niche and then partnering with schools, for me, it's schools and government agencies and nonprofits and saying, this is what we offer and this is how I can be of benefit. And then, we have certain rates that are suggested in our field as psychologists. So we kind of know what we can charge for that. Yep. But, the more you do it, the higher you get to charge, right? Like so that's kind of a trend where we're moving more towards that, which is a higher price tag. And it also just, it gives space then to create, which I love to do. I love to create videos and infographics and guides and free webinars. And I love that stuff, but you still have to make money in order to pay for your time to not be seeing clients to do that. So that's where we've shifted the business.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And I think it's timely for a lot of people running an online education business that you can't just rely, well, oftentimes it's hard to just rely on one digital product or online course these days, particularly if you're not seeing the traction that you want. There's still a lot of businesses that do quite well with just that. But there's so many other ways that you can be starting to monetize, your content creation, your education. And I think there's always a really strong byproduct of doing these in-person events and direct coaching. You build such a strong relationship with that audience that, a big byproduct of that, you get a lot of content out of it, but you also get people that are going to become repeat purchasers. I think the relationship you build with them versus them doing a self-paced course is a lot more meaningful, a lot more impactful. And that translates through the business. So that's really cool to hear that you're finding a mix between all of those. Yeah.
We're also seeing people's attention span shrink. So before COVID, it was really popular for people to purchase a course. Like, ours are accredited. So they're like sometimes 6 hours long, like 6 hours worth of content. People now are hustling. It's harder to make a living right now. Things are very expensive. So people don't have a lot of time, and parents in particular don't have a lot of time. So what we're also finding is it's more helpful to sell something that is shorter in length and a smaller price tag and larger quantities. So that's something to also consider is people want to sell a big course, but people don't have time. So if you can sell something that is a value that is a smaller price tag, but packs a big punch, you can then make I feel like a lot more money that way than selling something with a higher price point on it that's longer in duration. So that's something just to consider as we are starting to reduce the length of our content and then the price tag, but people are more likely to buy because they can afford it. And it doesn't seem so scary to finish it, if that makes sense. So we also have to take into consideration how technology has messed with people's ability to focus. Plus, they're more stressed and less resourced. So we have to pivot in terms of how we're delivering, I think, our content as well, to depending what niche you're in. For me, it's education with parents. So, I mean, I'm a parent. I got 3 kids at home. So I don't have time to take a 6-hour course right now, but I do have time to take something that's an hour long. And that to me is manageable, or a quick little ebook that's 25 pages long that was $5. I'll buy that all day long.
Yeah. Do you have an example of something recently that you guys have like shrunk down or created a sort of,
So I'll give you an example. So we wrote a book. It's called The Parenting Handbook. We released it in March. And it's more generic. Like it talks about basically all the things I would teach parents if their kid was in counseling with me. Like these are all the components of mental health we have to consider. Like when we want kids to be healthy. Now, what we found is we wrote 3 chapters on discipline. And a lot of parents, just because through social and sitting with parents, they're like, my kid's acting out and they have these big behaviors and oh my God, I don't know what to do. So what we did is we took 3 of our most popular chapters on discipline, just on discipline with kids, which is really practical. This is what you do. This is what you say, and sold that as an ebook. And oh my goodness, that has sold almost as much as our original book has. And if you think of the cost to print one of these, think about it. Like it's quite steep to do an ebook with 3 chapters we've already published. It's already been formatted. The profit's actually higher for us.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy? To sell 3 chapters of an ebook from the book we published. Like that's just one example where it's like, actually, it was more profitable for us just to take a couple chapters of that book and sell them as individual products. So, I mean, this is the thing. And the reason we wrote a book too was to get more speaking engagements. It does help. So not saying everyone has to write a book, but that was one way we condensed something like a long form product we made that people maybe don't have time for. And we made it into a smaller, cheaper option that sells for, $8 American versus 25, right? Or 20, I think it's 20 American versus 8, but it was already formatted. We just put a different cover on it.
Yeah.
But that's what parents wanted. It was really specific. It's what they didn't want to go through the whole book. They just like, help me with this one problem.
Yeah. So what was the problem again? The 3 chapters we're focusing on?
It was discipline. It was like discipline with kids. Like, how do I handle big behaviors? Like my kid lied, or they threw a tantrum, or they hit their brother. Like, what do I do with this? And so it's very practical, and it just solved a quick problem, and it was affordable for them. So that is something we upsell on our website. For every time someone clicks on our website to go purchase something, we upsell them on that one really small, very inexpensive, and it gets bought more times than I can count because it's just $8.
Yeah.
So they might not even buy the course, but that is an option as an add-on. They'll sometimes just not take the course and they'll just buy that. But to me, it's like, well, that was easy. It's affordable, and if they find value in it, they're going to come back to our organization for maybe a bigger ticket item down the road.
100%. No,
but they can only afford $8 right now, which is fine by me. Like if they think it's a value, and I think it is, when something else comes up, they will be more inclined to trust us and say, I'm going to try that product that's $100 versus the $8 purchase.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's such a good example of just showing that a lot of people out there are looking for short, as you said, short, specific solutions to their specific problems. And it sounds like that's what you've done. You've taken, specific knowledge from your book and just broken it down into one particular niche area on discipline and priced it at a really competitive price point. And that's really cool. Is there a particular digital product or low ticket item that's also working well? Because I know you're running Facebook and Instagram ads. Is there something that's working well on the advertising side of things, or when it comes to ads for your brand? What do you tend to focus on? What's your strategy around that?
We pretty much either boost our content, so just to get more eyeballs on the account. So we take really popular organic material that we've created. We make sure most of the time it's organic. Sometimes we boost other people's work if it's done well, simply just getting eyeballs on our account through sequenced reels and things like that. There's the odd one. I usually boost one. And then we also, I'm sure many of you listening to this are familiar with what iOS did in a couple of years ago. Is it 2.5 years ago now, 3 years?
Yep.
Where before we could create a $900 campaign and I could sell out basically a whole lecture hall with 250 people. No, all day long, because we could retarget people who were interested in that particular event very easily. Because it takes somebody 7 times to see something before they're willing to buy it. Meta and iOS and all these changes that have happened, we can't target people in the same way anymore, which I get it, data privacy, it's a whole thing, I understand. But as an e-commerce business, it was very painful switch, very painful. So marketing trends have really impacted whether somebody will see a direct ad. Does that make sense? And take action on it. So my advice to anyone doing this is offer something of value for free and get them in an email marketing funnel immediately. Because at any point, Meta could disappear. There's a whole legislation around TikTok right now. We may not have it anymore. You know, I'm not huge on TikTok. We do have an account, but that's our demographics on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. So Meta's still around. I don't think it's going anywhere. TikTok might. So you could have a million followers on Meta. They close down, you're hooped. All that money you've poured into that platform is gone. And I was told this 6 years ago. Yes, you want followers to ingest your content, but and you want that pixel, but you don't own that data. And at any point, your Facebook account could be shut down. We've actually had that happen. And it was horrible. You start all over again. And guess what? Meta can just do that and there's nothing you can do about it. So to me, what makes more sense is to get someone's data. And we do not buy data. We only use it through offering printables and free webinars. And we've been doing this since the start of our business. And that is how we make a very big bulk of our money, is through campaigns through MailChimp, where people enter a funnel and it offers them different products and events. But it just makes sure when you're doing this, you don't just do cold emails. They'll unsubscribe if you're constantly selling something. You sell something once in a while, but most of the focus is on value add. Like give them something, a blog entry. Here's a video tip on how to do this. Like then they keep opening your emails. You want that open rate to be 25% or higher. Like if you constantly just sell them something, you're going to unsubscribe. And I've learned that the hard way with this business. And so now we're very careful about our emails and how they go out and that they're not just inundating people with buy. It's more passive. It's like, hey, I hope you like this. By the way, we have this course, or by the way, we have this event. And once in a while, we'll be like, yeah, we have a sale or this, but we try to make sure that we space those apart very intentionally.
Mm-hmm. What would you say your frequency is now between like a sales oriented email and a content value first sort of email? Is
2 to 1? 2 to 1.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes 3 to 1.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean there isn't a sale in it, but it's at the bottom. Like it's not the first thing they see. So it's usually, an article or here's a tip or here's a video or here's a free printable. Like, in our work, that's the best strategy we have found. And we've talked to a lot of creators in our field. So I can only speak to our field that this works, and it does really well that way. Like we're really happy with it. But these funnels, you've got to constantly update them. They're a lot of work because you have to be constantly changing them and editing them and updating them. And you don't want your free resources on there forever. So you also have to change them. And this is only available for 24 hours. And then the printable's no longer there. Like you don't want to give all your stuff away for free. So again, there are a lot of nurturance kind of goes into these campaigns.
Have you built them like custom for each e-guide, or do you have like a generic nurture sequence that if anyone comes onto your list, they get like
we have different. We tag them. So when they come in, they have to tag, am I a parent, an educator, and also the subject. So we have different printables based on different subjects. So the funnel they go into is based on the type of resource they downloaded. but then sometimes we send stuff out just to our general audience too, right? Like that there's just stuff that we send out to everybody, like our events, like our summit, things like that. But we definitely have different funnels for different.
No, that's great. That's great. Yeah. And that's something we encourage our clients to do as well, is sort of, we always say content first, make the emails content based first. You can always have the call to action towards the bottom of the email, and try and do like a 3-to-1 ratio, at least, because I totally agree. If you're just selling to them the entire time, you're going to lose respect, lose trust. And people will just feel like, they're trying to be made to get a
they'll
quick
just
buck for the
unsubscribe.
business.
It's just, you're just going to lose all that money you put into your funnels is going to be gone. And so, it's not easy. Like if we think about pre-COVID, before iOS made all those darn changes with the freaking data privacy and people opting out of, anyway, it was a big kick. It was a huge blow to our agency. Like it was huge. Our ads couldn't be targeted in the same way. Now Google's nice. Google ads are much more efficient than Meta. Meta's horrible now. Doesn't mean you shouldn't be on there, but I feel Meta's more for free things or like brand, trust in brands and organic content. But for selling cold, Meta's horrible, like horrible. It used to be like the best place to do that. But now because of targeting and we can't retarget, we can only retarget like 20% of people now. Like before it was 70 to 80. So it's just not great, but it's really great for funnels where somebody just gives their email and they get something for free. So that's where it's kind of at.
How are you using Google ads then? Are you doing a lot of Google search? Is it YouTube? Are you doing sort of a
YouTube?
Okay. YouTube,
because we're global. You'd have to be a pretty big organization you can target Google ads if you're a local business much better, but if you have a niche on YouTube, that's where you would kind of spend some of your Google ads on. You're more likely to do the in-feed kind of ads. Is where I would spend it. Like we have a podcast, so we have an ad that we spend a big campaign on promoting our podcast every month on YouTube. That's a huge one. Yeah, and we're moving more towards YouTube now. So we're playing with this. It's a big part of our 2025 focus is we're moving a lot of content onto YouTube for monetization to see how it does. I'll let you know if you talk to me in 6 months how it's going. I can't speak to it yet. I do know we're trending that way though. Yeah. And I know a lot of creators who are. No,
for sure. I mean, I've also got the podcast here. That's also a lot of the intention behind this as well is, you get people listening to a 45-minute, hour-long podcast with you on that particular topic. It just, that sense of relationship someone gets with you is obviously a lot stronger than, maybe the free e-guide that they get. Not to say that that's not valuable, but for sure, it seems to be a trend. So let's see if it gets even more saturated.
I'd be curious what happens, because there's some changes happening, as I've been told, with different browsers, with like Firefox and Explorer and a few other browsers. They're changing the cookies. Like there's a whole legislation around data privacy. Google isn't trending that way, so hopefully that doesn't impact. But if somebody came in through a browser that is changing the cookie kind of data privacy, that could impact how laser targeted you can be with your promotions. So that's something kind of, I work with a marketing company. Like I don't run my own ads. I design them, but like somebody else runs them. And they've been just telling me, they just kind of give me this feedback. And I would definitely tell people, if you can hire somebody else to run your ads, you can help design them. Some people like that. I like designing them personally because I know my brand really well. I use Canva. It's super easy. I've split tested so many freaking things. I know what parents tend to like and professionals, but I don't want to split test these. I don't want to do any of that. I don't want to retarget. So having a company that specifically ups our SEO is a huge one. So I always have somebody and you can go to Upwork to find someone really inexpensive to do this. Upwork is great. So I have someone in India who does our SEO on our website. And then I have another company that is Canadian, actually, that does all our ads, and they're very affordable. And they are the ones who just take care of these campaigns. I don't want to stress about that. And I just found it, I've been with many companies, and this company I trust the most because that's all they do. They don't do anything else. They just run ads on Google and Meta. So they're good. So I always say, like, hire someone smarter than you in what they do. I don't do my own accounting. I have an accountant. I have someone who specializes in SEO. I have someone who specializes in web development. There's, we do our own email marketing campaigns. I would love someone to do them for us, but we do our own right now. Just because I have someone in-house who's great at designing them.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you said that, because I mean that's our main service as well as Google and Meta ads in this space as well. And we hear it a lot too. It's just the founder, the educator, the creator. There's so much on your plate already. Getting down to the nitty gritty of split testing an audience or a creative on ads and looking at the daily reporting. You can do it, but it's like everything in your business. You can't be everywhere at every time, and you got to pick which ones. And having, obviously my opinion is biased, but having, as you said, someone specialized on the ads, it's such a high leverage activity of the business that you can't really, if you're serious about growing and keeping up, you can't really afford to be slacking on that side of things if it's a part of your growth.
And I started doing them myself. For the first 3 years of our business, I did all the split testing. So I have a good entry knowledge of how to do this. So at least I can look at the campaigns being like, I know what those numbers mean. I can say like, can you send me the result of the split test? Like, because I need to know what to make. But and that's back when it was so easy to retarget though. Like that's back when it wasn't complicated. It was somebody saw the thing 7 times, they bought. But that is not the trend now. So that's why you need someone who really understands how and it's always changing. The data privacy laws are always changing. So you need to know for your, I think, business, should you be using Google ads or should you be using Meta? Like it really depends on your business. And if you have good organic content that you can then, I think, change it to a funnel, then Meta's great. Like that is a great way to get people in a funnel. But if you don't have good organic content to do that, you might be better with Google ads. Like I think it really depends, and maybe get them on your YouTube channel because you have good long form content. Yeah. So I think it just depends on, like, as a creator too, is where do you hook people?
Yeah.
So, and if do you use funnels? Are you using what? And we probably should be using funnels. Like, so I tell everybody, use a darn funnel. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, no, I like what you mean there. Where are you hooking people? And I think you've touched on it perfectly there. Like there is a short-term and long-term strategy with your ads. I think what you're doing with promoting your podcasts on across on YouTube, that's fantastic. And then you've sort of isolated Meta as more of like a top of funnel entry level point with the e-guides and stuff like that. So I think once you combine all of that together, you've sort of got that short-term and long-term play in mind. It sounds like you're on a great path there. So lots going on for you. What's next for your brand? What's coming up? Any big sort of next moves for the brand? Would love to hear.
Yeah, we're writing a second book right now with a fairly big author. So we decided, because Tanya and I, we're in our early 40s. And in terms of being authors, we're pretty young, if that makes sense in our field. Most people are writing books a little later. I mean, it's getting younger, but we wanted to partner and it's part of it strategic. Hopefully he's not listening to this, but he's a very well-known author and he has a huge following. So to us, we said, our next book, I think part of the strategy is pairing with someone who has a good brand as well. So we're going to co-write a book with someone. We both have good platforms. We both have good brand recognition. And then so I think together it makes the marketing very easy for a book when you both have big platforms. So we decided to write with him instead of just writing it on our own. So we're in the middle of doing that. We're about halfway through the book at this point. So hopefully it'll be done by June and then on the bookshelves by next Christmas is our plan once we get the editing done. And then the big move is we're doing more B2B. And then the YouTube is really where we're going to try to shift right now. So we're playing with different types of videos, different generations of parents like different formats. So that's a hard one too. Older generation, my generation in their 40s, like more polished videos. Gen Z, so the parents in their late 20s, early 30s, like really organic, unedited, raw videos. So it's like we're serving 2 different generations of how they ingest and trust content. So that's also a shift, is thinking like how old your audience is, because one will like this more, like more B-roll, and you look at I'm dressed like in a jacket and something very polished, versus a younger parent wants to see me in a ponytail and no makeup on and just talking about how like hard parenting is and here are some ideas. Like it's different. So that's another thing that's starting to shift our market trends towards like what age demographic you're hitting. So we're split testing the types of videos on YouTube, people different age, like if we need to do both or we should do one. Like now we're starting to test the types of videos. We already know this on Meta right now that people want, or they don't want B-roll. They want some B-roll is okay, but they generally want something more organic. So that's fine. Like they just want to see your face outdoors in your kitchen, like just talking, like you're not kind of standing here with everything poised, and like they don't want that. They don't feel like you're reading or you're teaching in a lecture theater, basically, unless you are actually in the lecture theater, which is ironic because they like that. But it's still raw. It's unedited. You're just talking, right? So I think that's another thing, is taking a look at how old is your audience and what kind of videos are really speaking to them, which means you have to pivot. You have to analyze this every about 6 months. What age, what kinds of things are they really enjoying? And then your content has to change.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It changes so quickly. And
as a creator.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I refer to it a lot as just being on the hamster wheel in this podcast, speaking with everyone. It's sort of, it's a love-hate relationship, I feel, because, it's so powerful, but also I think a lot of people feel sort of like at the platform's peril, like it's always just sort of something that you also need to do in order to sustain the business. But also,
they never used to have to be like business owners, never had to be creators. And now it is like a requirement, which is really tiring, honestly, as a business owner. And I think there's a high level of burnout in our industry because I know for me, there's times I'm like, I don't want to make a bloody video. I just want to share someone else's things. Like there are people I'm decent, but I know I'm not going to be like, that isn't my main job. Like that's not where I shine. I joke, I'm very left brain. So like, I'm creative enough, if that makes sense, that I can get away with it. But honestly, eventually we need to hire someone who that's all they do. Honestly, that's the dream, is I can step away from the creator mode. Yeah, I like creating courses. I'll always do. Speaking, I'll always do. I'm fine with that. Writing content like that, people for funnels, I'm good with that. But the social media, oh my gosh, it would be wonderful.
What ideas do you have for that? Like, and just in general, because I think that's a great point you made. There's a lot of business owners that are not content creators and might never ever excel at that. So what have you done in that area to help, sort of bridge the gap? Like, have you brought in help? How have you got in extra people to sort of take on a lot of the editing part of for you? Or what have you done?
That's actually probably been the biggest strife in our business, is finding people who are aligned with our brand who create. So I have let go of a lot of people who have tried my role in social media and it has not gone well. So because it's just, it's hard when you know your audience from day one of the business. You know what they like. Like and then you're kind of watching. I spend time on social. Actually, I'm not on social personally, hardly ever. It's only for work. And then I want to put my phone down and throw my computer out the window because I'm so sick of being online. But the one thing we're looking at doing is partnering. And I don't mean paying people when I say partner. I mean, we have big enough brand recognition now, like that people would be happy to have us feature their content on our social. So we are now looking towards, looking at smaller creators and saying, do you want to co-create something? Can I feature this? Or can you create something that's similar to this and I'll feature you? I'm leaning more towards that. Someone who is upcoming, but not, doesn't have 200,000 followers at this point. Maybe they have 10, but I can see they have a lot of talent and their brand looks similar to the kind of videos that our audience likes. Yeah. And most people want that exposure. So to me, I guess, I don't know if that would work for anyone else, but for me, that is where we're leaning towards now, is partnering with other accounts to make this easier. Like
that. Yeah, that's cool. I like that. And is your plan to, I mean, you can feel free to answer this or not, but like, would it be to take, existing reels, for example, that have done really well for them organically and say, hey, can we tweak that and just make one a little bit more specific? Or do you try and take that exact format, just post it on your channel? And
I've already done the latter. And unfortunately, Instagram liked that for a while. It doesn't like it anymore. So sequencing, And what do you call it? The other one? There's sequencing, and then there's another thing on Meta. Anyway, sorry, it's like repurposing. I just forgot what it's called. There's 2 different ways you can share content, and you have to change it quite a bit for Meta to push it. Like you'll lose organic following. So it would make sense that someone would have to like create a reel that's different, or maybe I changed the audio with my voice or someone else's, and we just use the background and then we cater it. So we just change it in some degree. Is what I would do, because we worked with so many creators where I found a good piece of content that they made. They sent me the video and we reposted it, but because it wasn't organic and they had already posted it, it doesn't do as well. So I have tried that strategy. It was okay. It's not great. But it helps, like for sure. I don't have to make the content. All I had to do was, can I post your video? And now that Instagram has sequencing, like you can change videos and just, you don't even need permission. As long as their privacy settings say that you can share their content, you can do that yourself. You don't need permission. The time we needed permission, this was about 1.5 years ago. So, I mean, even that strategy is this, Instagram has changed some things in the last 3 months, 2 months, actually. I've noticed a shift in August. So something shifted, and sequencing reels is not doing as well now. So we hit some million.
Which is the part where you're saying you're just grabbing their content
and adding something to the end of it, or putting stickers on it, or adding a commentary. They still prefer organic, meaning you made it.
How are you downloading those? How are you getting access to their content? Are you using like
it's on Instagram. There's a feature you can just
within Instagram.
That you just share basically it's like sharing, but through editing the reels, you have to edit them. You have to do something different to them. You can't just repost them. And it was doing really well for a while. And then, the algorithm shifts, because it does every couple months, the algorithm shifts. So it does. I see lots of accounts. That's all they do. And I think it worked really well for a while. And now we're shifting again. So I really recommend find some creators who focus on what the trends are on social, because they do shift, which is very frustrating as a creator. Is every 3 months, Meta, in particular Meta, will completely flip the algorithm, and you'll be like, this worked and now it doesn't. And it is very frustrating as a business owner when they do this, and I'm not sure why they do this, but they do it, and you just roll with it. So I think I follow a couple accounts that give you tips on algorithms, and they say this is the trend. And so find those creators on Instagram. They will give you tips all the time of what is shifting.
Yeah, absolutely. Keep up with it. Cool. Well, Tammy, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to have you on the podcast. If anyone wants to learn more about your resources, where should they go?
Just go to the Institute of Child Psychology.com. We have a free summit coming up. For any of you in business, this is a great way to build your followers, and we do make money doing this. But it's also a give back. We know a lot of parents who can't afford mental health help. They want to be better parents. So this summit is a way for parents to be able to access this information. It's just time limited. So you have access for 24 hours for each day of the summit. So if you go to the Institute of Child Psychology.com, you'll see there's a tab at the top that says summit registration, and people can enroll. And even if you're a business, enroll and see how we do it. See how we run it, and see like what that looks like, and the emails you get. Like, please take a look at that. Like, we weren't the first person doing this. For sure, there were other people doing this long before we were. But it's a great way to connect and to get to know and develop relationships with other creators and other professionals. And we get repeat business with these creators, and we do podcasts with them. It's a wonderful way to collaborate. And that's a really important thing. You have to collaborate in this business. You cannot do this by yourself. So find other similar accounts, work together. Everyone's frustrated with Meta. So if you can find ways to partner, develop these funnels, promote other people's work, it's not a scarcity mindset, right? We want to promote and say, I want to help other people get their work out there as well. I think that collaboration is very important to the success of your business.
No, 100%, really good advice. And thanks for mentioning that as well. For anyone listening, go jump in, have a look at the summits, have a look what Tammy and the team are doing in terms of marketing. It sounds like you're all over it. So really cool. Thanks for having you on the show, and wish you all the best with the event and the book launch. Yeah.
Thank you. Take care.
Tammy.